But what is really infuriating is, how the U.S. government covers up for them every single time. This liar Biden is just unbelievable. It's just beyond the pale. I mean, Israel had been relying on air attacks and some special units, but to go actually and fight house to house and hand to hand combat, where Palestinians have been training and waiting for this, and we're not talking about a couple of thousand, we're talking about tens of thousands of Palestinians who are well armed and waiting for this day to happen. I think that they will have also, the Israelis will have a shock and another surprise of the amount of resistance that they're going to face. So and if the United States decides to intervene to save Israel, because Israel is losing, then Iran might actually get involved, and then who knows who else. Iraq militia groups have been threatening, militias from Yemen have been threatening. It's going to really get quickly out of hand, which I think explains why the U.S. right now is pressuring the Israeli government for restraint and try to find another way.
Welcome to another episode of Twice Told Tale podcast. With us today is Dr. Sami Al-Arian. He's the director for the Center of Islam and Global Affairs and in Istanbul. So welcome, Sami. We're going to talk today about this ongoing horror in Gaza. It didn't just start in the last 2 weeks. It's been going on for 75 years, but the current ramping up of genocide by the Zionist entity is absolutely insane, and it's something we've never seen before. So maybe you could just fill us in on your perspective, what's going on and how it is in Turkey. How's the reaction there?
Well, indeed. I mean, this conflict did not start 2 weeks ago. It's been an ongoing conflict because of the rise of the Zionist movement over a century and a quarter ago. As you know, the Zionist movement came as part of the prosecution of a French officer, in which Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, was shocked to see that there's still a great amount of anti-Semitism in France and across Europe. So Zionism was born out of that persecution of Jews in Europe, and then it turned into a movement that wanted to replace people with other people. So basically it's a settler colonial racist supremacist movement that is trying to uproot the Palestinians, the indigenous people of the land of Palestine, with Jewish communities around the world. It started by allying itself with some colonial powers. It started with Britain, and then over time, it had special relationships with multiple colonial powers, such as France and Germany and so on. But lastly, for the past 6 decades, it has been closely linked to the United States, because Israel and the U.S. is not just a foreign policy issue, it's also a domestic issue because of the large community of Jews in the United States and the amount of influence the Zionist lobby has in many sectors of society. So this movement culminated by basically establishing its own state in 1948 by expelling over 60% of the Palestinian people, taking over their land. Keep in mind that at the turn of the century, the number of Jews in Palestine did not exceed 3%. And because of the British mandate, starting in 1917 and ending in 1948, over these 3 decades, there were an illegal immigration of Jewish communities, basically from Europe into Palestine. So they amounted to about 33% of the population by the time the state was established. They only owned 6.5% of the land. So through force, sheer force, massacres and all kinds of violent activities, culminating in a war in 1948, they took about 78% of the land. Then they conquered again in what's called Six-Day War in 1967, in which they took the whole of Palestine. Palestinians today inside the occupied territories, inside Palestine, inside the pre-1948 areas and throughout, historical Palestine actually outnumber the number of Jews. Yet, what we have there is an apartheid-like Israeli-style regime in which Palestinians basically have no legal rights, no political rights, in which they have been under occupation now for over 5 decades. Basically, their life is so miserable that a Palestinian in the West Bank, for example, to go from his village to perhaps another town or another university, that as a student, they would have to go sometimes through 10 or 15 checkpoints. Something that would have taken you 15 minutes may take you 2 hours. So this kind of an environment the Palestinians have been living under, and the world has just been looking the other way, pretending as if that there is a process for a political settlement, which there hasn't been any, and never did the Zionists really intend to have any kind of political settlement, because they are dead set on having the historical land of Palestine basically for Jews. And this, for the past year, if we want to know the immediate reasons what happened on October the 7th, we have really to go back to the time where Netanyahu became the prime minister with his racist and right-wing allies, in which they thought that this is a historic opportunity for them, not only to take over the land of Palestine, but to end the conflict altogether. And they said that so publicly. I mean, it's not hidden anymore. So Smotrich is the current finance minister and one of the architects of this plan, and is also an ally of Netanyahu, said in multiple speeches that the Palestinians really have 3 options. One, they can admit or they can recognize that Israel is only a state for the Jewish people, that they have no legal or political rights. They can stay there as subjects by acknowledging these facts, that they can only, they could have a different kind of a system that is not citizenship, but at the mercy of the government of Israel. Or if they don't like that system, then they could simply take some money, compensation, and leave. And if they don't like it, they would be killed. This is his plan. He said it over and over. Even he repeated it in France a few months ago when he visited there. And he actually showed the map of Israel as not having any kind of Palestinian state or sovereignty. Netanyahu said that in so many, not necessarily publicly, but in actions where he blocked every single avenue to have any kind of a political settlement with the Palestinians. I guess Obama, during his waning days, as well as his Secretary of State, John Kerry, said as much. They said that the 2-state solution is dead, and even they did not try to veto the resolution towards the end of Obama's tenure, in which the United Nations condemned the building of settlements. There is no political process. So when they were empowered, at the beginning of this year, they started desecrating and going into daily incursions, sometimes weekly, but for the past 3 weeks, they have been, prior to this event, daily incursions, trying to impose what they call a division of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the holiest shrine in Islam outside Mecca and Medina, in which they really had no basis to do this, but because of sheer power, sheer violence, sheer ability to impose such things, they're trying to impose a time and place for them. And they have been, in the meantime, they've been insulting Palestinians, preventing them from praying, and harassing them, and detaining them, and imprisoning them. And they've been warned over and over that this kind of an activity, this kind of insult that they were heralding on the Palestinians, this would not go without response. In addition, they started also invading West Bank towns and villages and refugee camps. Since the beginning of the year, they killed about 250 people. Of course, since then, they killed another 100 since October 7th, including 40 children. And most of these were forces go in, they kill people, they bomb, or they destroy their homes and come back. All these kind of activities have been going on where the world is watching, doing nothing about it. And add to that, there have been also 5,500 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, in extremely harsh conditions. Now the one in charge of the of the prison system is again one of the most racist individuals in Israeli politics. He's also an ally of Netanyahu. His name is Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's been basically saying that they need to kill the Palestinians, to arm settlers, and to any Palestinian who would not listen to what Israel dictates should be killed on the spot. Now he in the prison system, since he's been in charge of it, they prevented any kind of communication with families, any kind of whatever freedoms within the system they have won in the past. They have been denied to make their life miserable and hell, and try to pressure their families. So while Hamas, who has about 2 or 3 soldiers, has been trying to negotiate some kind of a release or exchange, and they have refused that. And of course, on top of that, you can talk about the crippling siege on Gaza. Gaza has been under a blockade and siege completely, air, sea, and land for the past 16 years. A full, whole people, 2.3 million people have been under siege for 16 years. That even surpassed the blockade of Berlin or any kind of recent siege in the history of the world. No one is doing anything. The US doesn't care. Egypt is even part of that blockade and siege. Israel does not allow anything to go in and out without being in control. People have been suffocating. Children have been raised without having the basics and the necessities of life. And on top of that, they also wanted to liquidate the Palestinian issue, end it basically by opening to Arab regimes and other countries within the region. So they started normalizing with the Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco. They tried with Mauritania and Sudan and others, and they wanted to culminate it with Saudi Arabia, which would have been a stab in the heart of the Palestinian cause because of the symbolism that Saudi Arabia represents. So all these reasons, all these 5 reasons, were basically the main background that needs to be understood of why would the Palestinians resist and attack. And when you look at the operation, it wasn't really, there were no civilians actually targeted. And what we hear today is just a bunch of lies. First of all, no babies were ever attacked or decapitated. This is all a lie that Netanyahu spread and Biden just repeated. It's just simply not true. There isn't a single evidence that this has happened. There were absolutely no rapes. Actually, to the opposite. Those female Israeli settlers who were caught or they were briefly detained, they talk about humane treatment. They talk about how they were never insulted or any kind of a mistreatment. In fact, some of them were let go on the first day because they had children or they were suffering. Keep in mind today also a report came in the Israeli press in which they tried to put a lid on this, but it's been exposed now that the overwhelming majority of civilians who have been killed on October the 7th were because of friendly fires, because of Israeli fires. They were actually killing the Palestinians along with the people that were with them, and that's been also proven. But what Israel could not fathom is the fact that the Palestinians dared to resist, dared to attack, not attack civilians, but they attacked military bases, 11 military bases, several places where the people who were tormenting them, what's called the Gaza Brigade, these few thousand soldiers who have been basically enforcing the siege and tormenting Gazans for the past 16 years. This brigade was totally overrun. Many of its, who are soldiers, many of its members have been either killed or detained, and they were able actually to end this terror within few hours. They couldn't believe that Palestinians were capable of doing that, and they wanted to punish the Palestinians and try to restore the deterrence factor, because Israel always prided itself on the fact that its army is invincible. They can control the Palestinians, that they can do whatever they want, and that this deterrence factor, they can basically dictate what they want. But what they found is that There were Palestinians who dared them. They defeated them. They were able not only to end the Gaza brigade and make it inoperable, but they were also able to take hundreds of soldiers back to Gaza in order to become bargaining for the exchange of prisoners. And of course, the Israeli army, again, what we have here is an army with a state, not a state with an army. Israel basically is a military state, and that army could not understand what happened. But once they collected themselves, they wanted to punish the Palestinian and try to restore this deterrence. So that's what we've been seeing: a complete insanity, sociopath people, aided by the United States, aided by U.S. Weapons, planes and bombs and ammunition and rockets and Navy ships and every. It's just immersion of death. I mean, that's what the U.S. has been, and they have given them political cover and protection and diplomatic protection in the UN. And they've basically been trying to push them first towards getting even, but then they found out that this could really get out of hand. Now they're trying to restrain them. But what you have here is a bunch of generals who felt that they have been insulted, they have been defeated, that they have been basically put in place, and they want to take revenge. And in the meantime, all what they have been doing is destroying Palestinian life in a genocidal war. Everything that has been taking place is a classic definition of what a war crime is what a genocide is, what war against humanity is. Thousands of Palestinians. We just surpassed today 2,000 Palestinian children. These are people who are basically in their infants and early years, trying just to survive. They have been targeted viciously. Parents, because of this viciousness, have been writing the names of these children on their arms and legs so that they could be identified, because of that many people who are killed and they couldn't be identified. Biden tries to liken what happened in 9/11 to this war. Well, here are the figures, Mr. Biden. If you were to look at what happened in Gaza for the past 2 weeks and try to project that to the population in the US, in the last 2 weeks, if this happened to you in the US, 722,000 people would have been killed. 2.16 million people would have been injured. 200 million Americans will have been displaced without homes, will be in deserts or some places. It is that much of a catastrophe that Israel has been raining on the Palestinians with no stop. I mean, yesterday, over 500 people were killed. The day before, over 450 people were killed. The day before, 500 just in the hospital, plus hundreds others before the hospital was hit. And they talk about, a single rocket being misfired and it killed 500. Who are they kidding? This is so much of a propaganda. It is just unbelievable how many people are part of this unbelievable, unimaginable type of propaganda. The Palestinians in the past 23 years fired on Israel 28,800 rockets, killing 69 people. In 23 years, 28,800 rockets, killing 69 people. And they talk about one misfired rocket that would kill instantly 500 people. No rocket ever killed more than one person in the past 23 years. And when you look at the actual rocket, what it is just a very classic rockets, missiles, bombs that they have been using, which is US supplied, and it's very well known. And the reason it does not have a crater, that's their main argument, is because it explodes before 100 meters before it gets into the ground, because it's trying to kill as many people as possible, and that's why we have 500 casualties. A misfired rocket, when it goes in one place, it doesn't kill 500. It may kill 5, it may kill 10, but because this type of
fireball, yeah,
exactly. So because this kind of bomb explodes before, so all these shrapnels go into a wide diameter. That's why it killed so many people.
I think a lot of Americans don't understand is that you can't just leave Gaza. So Gaza is a concentration camp, exactly a concentration camp. And there's no difference. In fact, it may be even worse what Israel is doing if you want to compare it to the story of gas chambers and furnaces, because they're just literally bombing and vaporizing and burning alive the families as they eat dinner. I mean, it's like it's absolutely just it, to not compare it to the Holocaust is really like doing Israel's work for them, because this is exactly the Holocaust. And I don't know why people aren't making that comparison, but it's very disturbing. And in addition, in the West Bank now, I've seen a lot of disturbing videos of the militia handing out guns to all the settlers who want them, and they do it in like this award ceremony, like graduating from college or something, and they're handing these guns to people, which I can only assume is similar to what we saw in '94 in Rwanda, where they handed out machetes to have a genocide. And it looks like they're planning to do a massive killing in the West Bank. Do you think that's possible?
I mean, it's been taking place. I mean, it's not on the scale of Rwanda, of course, but over 100 people have been killed in the past couple of weeks. Every day they go into different refugee camp or a different town or a city. They storm it. They try to arrest people, apprehend them, or kill them, assassinate them, and then sometimes they even bomb their houses. I mean, this has been going on large scale. Not only that, what people do not know is that thousands of people have been arrested since. And if you'd resist arrest, you will be killed on the spot. If we had 5,500 people before October the 7th in detention, at the time there were 1,860 people who were detained for months or years without being charged. Today we have over 10,000 people from the West Bank who have been detained since October the 7th. So there is absolutely no legal recourse. There is no, I mean, this is, they declared war on the Palestinian people and they're trying to do it. But on the issue of the Gazans have no place to go, well, why would they leave their homes? I mean, let's say even if the Egyptian government, because that was the Israeli plan, is try to create another Nakba, which is a catastrophe, to have the Palestinians leave their home and try to be resettled somewhere else. The Palestinians said, no, we're not going anywhere. And then they said, okay, you need to leave the north, go to the south. When some people did that, they just bombed them. They didn't care. I mean, just 2 days ago, we had a church. This is the oldest, maybe the third oldest church on earth. This is a very old church in Gaza. And what did they do? They bomb it, and 18 Christians, Palestinian Christians, were killed, including over half of them were children. About 11 of them were children. And I saw yesterday an interview with one of the survivors who always going insane. He lost 3 of his children. He said, I waited so many years for these children, and he lost them just in an instant, all of them, 2 boys and 1 girl. And he couldn't believe it. And he was just looking at their pictures and he just went to get some water. And by the time he came back, they were killed. And he said, they told us that this is a safe place. And I came in a sanctuary. I came in a church. And why would they bomb a church? And by the way, the hospital where 500 people were killed, this is the oldest hospital in Palestine. And it's the Baptist hospital. It was run by Baptist missionary. They didn't care. Everything is fair game. And this is not surprising, but what is really infuriating is, how the US government covers up for them every single time. This liar Biden is just unbelievable. It's just beyond the pale when he's trying to bail them out every single time and try to make excuses for them. And then he starts lamenting and crying about decapitated babies that didn't exist. And when he's shown the Palestinian children who are actually losing their lives by the thousands, what does he say? Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Some of my friends from Gaza have told me the history of their family, and they're actually it's not like they were pushed into the Gaza refugee camp one time. That wasn't their first. Some of them were transferred over the history of since 48, like 4 times through 4 different refugee, violent transfers of people out of, they move to a camp, they build up they're given a tiny little tent, they build it up into like a small home, and then it's all stolen from them and they're pushed into another thing. And so that's what we're seeing now. And what really, so yeah, obviously they shouldn't leave. This is the remnant of whatever they were allowed to have of Palestine. I mean, their actual homes and farms have been stolen from them. But the thing that I don't get is how it is that Americans who are really good at supporting underdogs and are generally good people can see people's homes being stolen and blown up and their property, because property value is so important to American psychology, and they're seeing people just literally having everything stolen. If the average American saw a video of a grandma getting her purse stolen, and then some people ran after the person who stole them and beat him up, everyone would cheer that that guy got beaten up, even if he was beaten up close to death. He deserved it because he stole from that woman. Like, there's a very intrinsic understanding of justice in Americans, and yet they can see someone's entire family get exploded in front of their face and not feel sorry for them or feel like they should go get their pound of flesh as well. Like, I don't understand how Americans can be so blinded to the humanity. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in America 40 years, and I could tell you that American people, generally speaking, have been brainwashed when it comes to Israel-Palestine. It is very difficult to puncture this veneer of Israeli propaganda that people have been living with now for decades. I mean, ever since, this thing about people without a land, for a land without a people myth, and all the things that they have been building up with Hollywood movies and the popular culture and the political class and the whole propaganda that's been taking place, and all the monopoly of the media over the years on the Israeli narrative while silencing the Palestinian narrative. And I mean, we all know this, and if not, it's very easy to research nowadays. But with what's happening lately, two important developments. One is the explosion of social media, where people could see with themselves what's going on. It's not being sanitized, not being selected or silenced on mainstream media, so people could immediately see what's happening on the ground, and they could start asking these questions. I agree with you that the instinct of the American person is to be with the underdog, is to try to understand what's going on. But because of this brainwashing that's been taking place for decades, they've just they're putting the blind and walking blindly behind the Zionists. But I think that's changing. And secondly, it's also American Jews. There has been a shift within the generations, within American Jews. I think the old generation that's been trying to cover Israel's atrocities and crimes and massacres, that generation is dying and ending. And the new generation now is who has been fed these lies. I've known many of them, but I've seen also so much evidence where people could be told certain things, they go and visit and they find a completely different reality. They see that in their name, in the name of Judaism, people are being massacred, people are being deprived of basic rights. In the name of Judaism, the Zionists who are trying to equate Zionism with Judaism, which is a big lie, because Zionism is not Judaism. They're trying to do so much for the Palestinians in order to depopulate, to expel them from the land and try to make room for other Jews to come and replace them. So now a lot of this generation, they reject that, and now they have been speaking out, and we saw this in the past couple of weeks in demonstrations, in many settings in which they refused for Israel to use their name in trying to kill, maim, and expel Palestinians.
That's true. What do you think is going to happen in the near future? I mean, the images that we're seeing, the genocide that we're seeing, is really so depressing, and it's really sad how people are losing their lives. But I see, like, on social media, I see a lot of Palestinians expressing strong faith, and they want to rely on God, and they're just, I mean, the faith that we're seeing coming from Palestinians is, as always, it's really impressive. But I want to know, like, do you think we're going to expect regional war? Do you think the escalation is going to lead to a full-scale war? And then what, if that happens, what are we going to see like how are things going to change for Palestine and for the region?
Well, there are different scenarios that could take place. It's very difficult to predict one of them. Right now, the current Israeli government is dead set on land invasion. If that happens, I mean, obviously they haven't hidden the fact that they want to obliterate the resistance movements in Palestine and try to change the whole dynamic of the conflict by ending any kind of Palestinian resistance. And if they could also expel Palestinians, at least half of them, into the Sinai. For that to happen, if that were the case, I mean, if they were to actually have a land invasion, I think that could trigger other things, such as there is still a hot war, but it's just skirmishes at the border right now in the north between Hezbollah and Israel. But if they try to actually go and try to end this conflict by using indiscriminate violence, by killing many Palestinians in the hope that they could get as many resistor fighters as possible, and if they were successful in that endeavor, it might very well be that this war would be a regional war. It will widen, because I don't think the northern front would accept the annihilation of the southern front. But a lot of people also are predicting that's going to be a nightmare for the Israelis themselves. Most of these people who are at the border right now, 360,000 reservists plus some armies, most of these people are not well trained for this kind of fight. I mean, Israel had been relying on air attacks and some special units, but to go actually and fight house to house and hand-to-hand combat, where Palestinians have been training and waiting for this, and we're not talking about a couple of thousand, we're talking about tens of thousands of Palestinians who are well armed and waiting for this day to happen. I think that they will have also, the Israelis will have a shock and another surprise of the amount of resistance that they're going to face. So the question is whether they will be ready to accept thousands more casualties, even if they use indiscriminate violence and bombs in order to kill another 20 or 30,000 Palestinians in order to achieve this goal, and whether the world will actually allow this to happen and take place. So far, Palestinians lost more than 5,000, and the world, I mean, at least in the streets, I'm talking about popular support, has been shifting steadily. And this has been accelerating towards the Palestinians. Now, would they accept another 10 or 15 or 20,000 Palestinian casualties? Over half would be children, and another third would be women. And in order to get Israel, bloodthirsty military leaders satisfied? I don't think so. But let's say they do. But again, they will face Palestinian resistors. They're going to face possibly another front in the north. And if the United States decides to intervene to save Israel, because Israel is losing, then Iran might actually get involved, and then who knows who else? Iraq militia groups have been threatening, militias from Yemen have been threatening. It's going to really get quickly out of hand, which I think explains why the U.S. right now is pressuring the Israeli government for restraint and try to find another way. Not to speak of the so-called hostages, the prisoners that they have been taken during that operation, in which the hope is to have prisoners exchange, to get as many Palestinians out of Israeli jails in exchange for these soldiers and settlers that have been that have been detained and taken. Remember that Hamas said that those who are not settlers and are not soldiers will be released unconditionally, but they want for that. For the war, for a ceasefire to take place, so that they can let them go without being harmed. So all these dynamics are taking place. It's very difficult to guess which one would actually take place. But if I take the Israelis at their word, then I think we are facing an imminent land invasion in the next few days. They tried yesterday as a tryout, and they were beaten back immediately. 2 tanks tried to get in, they couldn't get in, and some tractors, and then they lost a soldier and with 3 wounded. So they know that the Palestinians are ready for them. But so that's one scenario, that they will go into a limited incursion, try to put more pressure and more death, which would, in their view, put more pressure on the Palestinian fighters to give up. I don't think that strategy is working or will be working. Secondly, is to go full invasion, which this time will also involve naval landing from the sea, But I think that also would not succeed because the Palestinians are also ready for that kind of landing and incursion. So there will be stiff fights. I've heard military experts, some US, some Israeli, that they think that this is going to be a very difficult fight, that in order to neutralize insurgency, and Petraeus was saying this the other day, you need about 3 to 10 years. But even they are estimating 3 to 6 months. The question is, can Israel actually withstand 3 to 6 months where the economy is almost at standstill and all these reservists who are not well trained for this kind of combat, they will go in and maybe suffer thousands of casualties. I think that's partly what the U.S. is afraid of, not to even think about the spread of this war outside Palestine that may involve Lebanon or other theaters, which will distract the U.S. from its main foreign policy or strategic interests, whether it's in China or in Europe with Ukraine. So it's a huge mess. And I think very soon, when you add to the mix here that the public opinion is decisively moving, forget about the mainstream media, because they are just tools of those who are in power. But if the public opinion around the world shifts completely and massively in the direction of the Palestinians, that's going to put a lot of pressure on many governments in order to stop this. And we're seeing the carnage, the mayhem, the killing, the decapitating of bodies of Palestinians every single day. How are we going to deal with that? Add to that the starvation, the lack of water, lack of electricity, lack of fuel, lack of everything. The cold is coming up. So there's a huge, many factors, huge dynamics. And I think U.S. policymakers, or at least some people in the government now, they think that if they're going to go and neutralize Hamas in a couple of weeks, we'll give you the green light, even if 20,000 Palestinians killed, but you cannot even guarantee that outcome. So you're going to just create factors where we cannot control it. And that's why we're not seeing the ground invasion taking place immediately. And I think, who knows? I mean, they might postpone it, or they might have a limited one, or they may have a negotiated settlement, which I think is not likely. But everybody is waiting.
What do you think is the stability of Egypt and Jordan, those corrupt U.S.-backed regimes? Because it doesn't seem like they could hold off the wave of humanity that's wanting to rise up on the borders.
This is a very interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I have it on good authority that both regimes were offered billions of dollars in exchange for their help in trying to basically implement the plan that the Israelis have. But the problem is the Israelis don't have a single working plan. I mean, these regimes on the surface have been against any displacement of Palestinians. They don't want to, they are afraid about the stability of the region. But I think at the end of the day, they will go along with whatever the U.S. would tell them to go along with. But I think the U.S. itself doesn't know what it wants. It did tell them, in exchange for these billions of dollars, we wanted to do this and that. That didn't work because the Palestinians refused to go to Egypt. And I think the Egyptian army also, regardless of what the ruler says, the Egyptian army also is very concerned about having 1 million Palestinians at the border in Sinai, where they can't even control Sinai from the tribes. So that would have been a problem for national security, for Egyptian national security. So I don't think they have much to offer, and I think they are trying also not to alienate their people. So they're allowing thousands and hundreds of thousands of demonstrations and protesters in the streets. They try to control it as much as possible. They don't want it to get out of hand. But who knows? I mean, if Israel starts killing even more and more brutality we see on TV, nothing could be guaranteed. These people could actually go and start things that are not customarily, that are not ordinarily done, such as attacking embassies or things of that sort, which will put them basically in direct confrontation with the security forces, and that could really get out of hand. That's why they are afraid, and that's why they're trying to pressure the U.S. But at the end of the day, their pressure and their will, it doesn't carry much with Israel. So at the very end, what's going to happen is going to depend on what the Israelis decide to do and what the Americans would allow them to do. And when I say that, I'm not saying that all the courts or all the balls are in Israel's court. What I'm saying is that the Israeli generals, are intent on revenge, and they don't think what they have accomplished so far does that. So what they want to do is to get some kind of a victory, whatever that means for them, which they define to be the total dismantlement of the resistance movements, which is untenable. You cannot do that. You cannot undo, or you cannot stop, or you cannot obliterate a movement or an idea. You can probably kill certain people. So perhaps they want to kill certain leaders and say, okay, now we killed the leaders of whoever did this, but that's going to be a tall order. So that's why we are in a big mess.
You're certainly not going to kill a resistance movement by slaughtering children, because that is going to just make everything much more emotionally tied to the resistance. Everyone is going to support the resistance when they see what the alternative is. But my question more about Egypt and Jordan is, are those leaders really just balancing a couple $1 billion versus the entire will of the populations that they rule over? I mean, are they really just that simple-minded and basic? Like, they're not even, I mean, they have so many millions of people in their population. They have enough money. Do they really, is billions of dollars more in their bank account enough for them to just be traitors to their own populations?
That's not how they look at it. First of all, many of the regimes in the area, not just these two regimes, they get their legitimacy from US support rather than legitimacy from the people. I'm not saying all of them, but many of them. But more importantly, these regimes are very unstable. Economically, they are extremely unstable. Egypt, for example, has a foreign debt of almost $169 billion, 169, in which they have to pay the majority of their income just to pay off the debt, the interest on the debt, not even the principal. So if the US is going to offer it $60 or $70 billion, that will save Sisi. Particularly, he's going through, of course, we don't have free and fair elections in Egypt, but that would at least address the issue that he is bringing some resources. The same thing as Mubarak did during the first Gulf War. During the first Gulf War, in exchange for his support so that the US could invade Iraq or at least get Iraq out of Kuwait, they basically wrote off all Egyptian debt. At the time, it was like $26 or $27 billion. Today, it's much more. It's about $170 billion. So he was trying to get as much as he could. I don't know, what the final number would be, but that is going to go a long way because the Egyptian pound just totally collapsed in the past 2 years, and there are no relief insights. So in his mind, if he said, he may reason that, okay, Hamas and the resistance movements are going to be done with anyway, so why don't I get something out of this? But I don't think the Egyptian people would go along. And more importantly, the thing that they are asking him to do is going to the heart of Egyptian national security. And my hunch is also that there will be a strong opposition from the army. Even if the army goes along with them, there will still be some officers there that they will have a great suspicion about accepting such an arrangement. And I think that's what has transpired in the past week. For Jordan, the issue also has to do with the whole country of Jordan. It's just it depends on many aspects of its security on the U.S. I remember there was a book by the Washington Post reporter, what's his name, the guy who did, he wrote about Obama's first year, Bob Woodward, and he wrote a book about the first year of Obama, 2009, and in the first chapter, he was talking with, or he said that Obama, before he was inaugurated in December 2008, with the head of the CIA at the time, Michael Hayden, who was general, and he was telling him about the different operations and the different structures of the CIA around the world. And then when it came to Jordan, basically he gave him one word. He said, "We own it. We own it." So that's how he characterized Jordan, as being a country that was owned by the CIA. So if that's how it's characterized and that's how it's looked at, and then of course there are many indications, I don't want to go through them now, to show that these governments really owe their existence, their future, at least in their minds, not necessarily from the legitimacy of the people that they rule, but from the patronage of the United States.
Well, I just wonder who's going to cancel the U.S.'s debt that's how easily it's controlled from Egypt. All right, so well, that I guess clears up some. Do you have more questions, Sit there?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question. Like, since the October 7 events, we have been hearing accusations, especially from the Israeli regime, but also from certain people in the U.S. government, that Iran was behind it and Iran plotted the whole thing. Even though then Blinken came out and said that there is no evidence, which I think it's because they want to avoid confrontation from Iran, and that the accusations are probably because they want to belittle the resistant forces, not that they actually think it's like that. Because, you know, it's like the invincible army of the Zionist regime could not be defeated like this by just one like resistant force, Palestinian resistant force in Gaza. So what do you think about that? What do you think is the role Iran is playing in? I mean, we know that Iran has been supporting Palestinian resistance. That's not a secret. But in this particular operation and until now, what do you think Iran's role has been so far?
I think Iran does not hide its role. I think Iran has been, or at least it says it's one of the biggest supporters, if not the biggest supporter of the resistance movements. And when I say that, no one is saying or divulging any secrets. Iran gives the resistance movement actual money, gives them arms, gives them technology, gives them knowledge. It supports them. It deals with them as legitimate resistance movements, rather than shun them. The Iranian leaders at the highest level, they meet with leaders of the resistance, particularly Hezbollah, Hamas, and Jihad. So all this is well known. The technology, that whatever they have in Gaza, I think a lot of it may have even started with Iranian help. So the commitment of the Iranian regime, the current Iranian regime, to the liberation of Palestine, whatever that means, other than political settlements, is well known. The particular question about what did Iran know and was Iran part of the current operation? My hunch is that this is probably not the case, because the Iran does leave a space, plenty of space for the resistance movements to make their own decision, particularly in Palestine. I mean, I'm sure Hezbollah would coordinate more with Iran, but when it comes to Hamas and Jihad, they've always done stuff that, as far as I could see, that is not a direct chain in which Iran could tell them do this or do that. But of course, they coordinate. After the operation was taking place, Iran has shown that it is supportive. The Hezbollah said, we're not neutral, we're also supportive. They started their own clashes with the Zionist regime. And Iran has been trying also to mediate, or at least to coordinate what is called the axis of the resistance, but also with other regional powers. I think the foreign minister of Iran went to many capitals, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others, in trying to see if they can downplay this without having to escalate and spread the war. I think many of them, they may have the same ideas and support this, but at the end of the day, they don't really have lots of say. So my hunch is that, listening to the foreign ministry of Iran, he says they're not going to let the resistance be liquidated, and he warned more than once that the Northern Front could actually be launched, or could be part of this widening war if Israel either attacks Lebanon, or Israel in a preemptive strike, or Israel tried to liquidate the resistance in Gaza. And that would mean, of course, that the United States may enter the war. And if that happens, then you have the other regional players, such as the militias in Iraq and Yemen, getting into that. And if the United States or Israel or both decided, for whatever reason, attack Iran, and Iran gets involved, then you have basically a regional war with no limits. So, and he said basically that the resistance axis is ready for that. My hunch is that Iran will not get into a war. I think the other side know that this is going to be very dangerous escalation in which the whole region could be engulfed in fire. Just imagine what would be the price of oil with Iran in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking then about $400 or $500 a barrel in a world that is totally unstable. So I don't think that we're going to get to that far. Whether Hezbollah will go into full-fledged war or just stay engaging the Israeli forces at the north, tit for tat, that will depend pretty much on the performance of the Israeli army versus the Palestinian resistors in the south. If it appears, and that's my personal view, if it appears that the Israelis are winning big, I think the Hezbollah may be forced to go and launch a full-fledged war, which will also could get out of hand. So there are so many variables here, but I think this is how I see it. I think Iran will give support. Right now, I don't see Iran as part of the direct war.
You mentioned earlier that a church was attacked, a Christian hospital was attacked, but then the day after the church was attacked, the oldest mosque in Gaza was also attacked, which was over, I don't know, a 1,300-year-old or what, 1,000-year-old.
Right now,
the church was 1,600.
5 or 6 mosques have already been attacked.
But these are very ancient. I mean, the church at least was a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as I understood it. I mean, these are extremely ancient relics of religions, and Christianity is not safe from Zionism at all. And the idea that it is somehow nurtured in the U.S. through this Christian Zionist alliance. But the Christianity was born in Palestine. Jesus was a Palestinian, according to the Romans, and so this detachment from the Western Christianity to the birthplace of their religion and the actual genetic descendants of the disciples of Jesus who still live there, the Palestinian Christians, is really shocking to me. But also equally shocking is that like Anthony Blinken and a bunch of other people are trying to frame this whole thing as a religious war. So yeah, so maybe we could wrap that up with just you could comment on that and what do you think of this framing as a religious war?
I think Israel really has no respect whatsoever for Islam or Christianity. That's been proven over and over again. The fact that they are willing to go into the Al-Aqsa Mosque with their boots, shooting at people, at prayers, at people while they are praying. I mean, that's been shown. So Israel cannot be trusted to preserve any kind of heritage or cultural heritage or religious symbols or religious institutions. That's been proven over and over again. What we're seeing here basically is the true face of Zionism. Zionism is using Judaism to legitimize its settler colonialist project. It has a supremacist, racist ideology. Someone who calls their foes as human animals and willing to kill babies, not by mistake 1 day or 1 hour, but day after day after day after day, targeting them, whole families. Over 600 families have been wiped out. They have been totally wiped out. I know a person who visited me personally a few months ago who was a head of a think tank, and we were cooperating how we're going to do some studies and some research together. Not only was he killed with his family, 44 members of his family were totally wiped out. They were in the same building, huddling there during the attacks. They killed him, his wife, his 3 children, his brother, his brother's wife, and their children, and all their cousins who were together. 44 members. His name was Shihab, Abdurrahman Shihab. I mean, just imagine a whole family with all the kids, all the siblings are gone in an instant. Did they care? No, because that massacre was repeated day after day after day. So do you think they're going to respect any kind of religious heritage or religious symbol? Actually, they relish in the fact that they are leveling Gaza and they are threatening to level Gaza and its people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. And I know you're very busy, and I hope we will hear very good news very soon.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for
I'll
coming.
let you go.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of Twice Told Tales podcast. Please like and subscribe the video and leave your comments. And we'll see you again next week.